Representative Marco Erickson. How are you, sir?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So we were just talking about radio DJing. I was chatting with Monica Church the other day, and she was just like big into, like gangster rap and stuff when she was 18. But you were the DJ for a country station?
Yeah, and I played country music live, so a lot of people knew that was my passion.
Yeah. Did you play the guitar?
Oh, yeah. I sang in a band. I played in a bar. When I was 15, 16 years old, I'd be out there playing in the honky-tonks with my uncles. They had a band, so I'd jam with them. I wasn't that good, but I was, I like to sing and write songs. So
Man, the one-hit wonder of the dude who did the Rich Men north of Richmond.
Oh, yeah.
Holy, like 2023, do you know how many mandolins got sold that year? Like 10x what was sold the year before. Like he got the formula right. Country music has been singing about, the difficulties of life for a long time, but man, he struck a chord just right.
Yeah, he performed it on his own property out there with his family. I think is where he did that video. It went viral really quick. That's for sure. I saw well, what was interesting is he had been performing that song for a long time. Like he had been performing for a while, and finally it just hit. It was like boom, and it just hit. And then north of Richmond, or something like that. Whatever it was called.
Yeah, the Rich Men north of Richmond.
That's right.
Yeah. That was I remember 23 too. Like that was everything was going gangbusters at the beginning of 22. Right, it's like interest rates were still low, housing prices going up, and then like April of 22, things started slowing down because they started increasing interest rates. By mid 23. Everybody was feeling beat down, and it's like, gosh, man, that song kind of resonated. Listen, you're on JFAC. You're on a lot of different things.
Oh no, I'm not on that committee.
Oh,
not on that one. Yeah.
Okay. What committees are you on?
I serve on. No, that's cool. That's cool. I serve on I'm the vice chairman for health and welfare.
There you go. Yeah.
And then I serve on the local government committee and also the judiciary and rules.
Gotcha.
And then I'm on a special
judiciary. I got the JFAC and judiciary and rules.
Yeah, no problem.
And what's the specialty committee?
Specialty committee is one that's the Senate and the House together. It's called the Joint Joint Millennium Funds Committee.
Gotcha. Can you tell me something real fast?
Absolutely.
I had a guy in here the other day. His name's Chris Danley, and he is a road traffic and like civil engineer. I'm like, okay, I don't know squat about it because like
it's not my area either.
Yeah. But his criticism was that there are so many bills that get brought forward that are designed to essentially hamper local controls, right? Like specifically within his purview of like roads and whatnot. So if there was a bill, obviously, to have an appointed position on ACHD, it's like, what is the compelling value for the state government of Idaho to have a direct appointment onto a highway district, a county highway district? And you have a lot of things like that within law enforcement. There was a bill, I believe, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I had Chief Tracy Besterchia in here from Meridian. And the bill essentially said if your city had over 100,000 people, then your individual citizens could file a grievance with I believe the Attorney General's office if they felt like you weren't utilizing your resources to clear out homeless problems enough. And it's like, well, that affects like 3 cities, right? So there's this aspect of state encroachment onto local government and local control. Can you help me unpack that?
Well, I could tell you that I'm guessing there's a lot of individuals in the legislature who have private experience with something that happened like that. For example, the homeless one. I've worked with a lot of homeless people in my career. I've been in the encampments. I've gone down because I ran grants when I was worked in state government. So one of the grants I had was a homeless grant, and I would go down with my team and go in the tunnels down there in Las Vegas where you had 10,000 homeless people.
Dude, the tunnels.
Yes.
I read an article 15 years ago about that there's a whole population of people in those drainage ditches.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we would go down there, and we would, help them. We had these iPads, and you track where they've been going and help them get to their mental health appointments or their treatment appointments, whatever it was. Some people were on different spectrums of being ready for help. In that bill, they pushed trying to help get people off the street, trying to help them. But, in some of my local community, there's a coalition there that deals with homelessness, and they weren't too happy about that bill either. I just let them know, that's how things work. Sometimes you vote for things and they're not your favorite thing in the world, but this is how government works. And it doesn't mean it's the perfect solution, or, we may end up having to clean up some of that in the future too. So that's just this building and the way it works. There's politics in the work,
Yeah. Right. Talk to me about, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear about the efforts that were being made by Las Vegas to help the homeless population there, and comparing that to what's going on in Idaho. Because like we have homeless people here, you know, like we have more than we used to, but it's not nearly to the state of like the homeless industry that is perpetuated in places of like Vegas or San Francisco or things like that.
Yeah, the big difference is it's warmer there. So there's more people that will go and live in those conditions versus the cold of Idaho, right? So you'll experience more. We have a really nice city in Boise and all throughout Idaho. So there's still a homeless population if you pay attention. So what happened in Nevada is early on there were some lawsuits because they were just shipping them out of state. Say, here, get on this bus and paying for bus tickets and sending people away. And they got in trouble for that. You know, it was there were some laws and things they violated. So what happened was they just said, well, let's do our best to serve the public. And, you know, so they created programs like they had homeless shelters and they built ones for kids because they were homeless kids. You would imagine
living in the
when
tunnels.
I went and toured that my first time, there was 150 teenagers living there. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, all these kids are homeless? Like, where are their parents? You know, you ask all these random questions and then you get a million different stories. It's all similar stories. You know, what something bad happened with the family and, you know, the kids either run away, you know, there's sex trafficking. That city is very different than what you would expect in Idaho. We have a lot more conservative values here versus there. They're more permissible to some behavior like marijuana and you know, prostitution and all kinds of interesting things. Idaho would be like, no way, we're not allowing that here. Yeah, as you can tell with the bills we pass, we're really discouraging those behaviors in the state of Idaho. So, I mean, that kind of leads to that problem. But they just put resources and time and energy into helping the population, getting them the treatment. And still there's 10,000 people living in those tunnels. When it floods, they all, you know, they come out. Oh boy, that's interesting.
Dude, because specifically when it floods, it's not just the water, but it's the fumes, right? It's my understanding that like when that water brings all the nastiness from the city and it just it's like flushing your toilet, and everything that goes along with that just runs right into the tunnels.
You'd be surprised. There's beds in there.
Yeah.
The further in you go, you know, there's gang activity. I experienced all kinds of stuff when I went there. People were shooting up needles. There was a guy who just got jumped into a gang, and these social workers go and help them. And it was really cool to witness that. And I was just at the state, and my job was to fund those programs. So I wanted to see how our dollars were being spent in the field. And so I got to go experience that. And it doesn't scare me because I worked in mental health. So I dealt with a lot of that population many times in my lifetime, especially substance abuse treatment and that kind of thing. So I was used to seeing those things.
Gosh, man, that's a rough one. So bottom line is the state of Nevada and Las Vegas specifically, we're dealing with the homeless population in a real like get out of here, out of sight, out of mind, not my responsibility. They flip it around. They work specific programs to try to help with shelters and whatnot. What you're saying about drugs and prostitution, it's interesting to bring that up because Phil Gore, who's the chief learning officer for the Idaho School Boards Association, interviewed him a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the value proposition for the general populace with public education. Because everybody asks the question like, well, what's in it for me, right? And especially with some of the school choice conversation brought with it a lot of principles centered around, well, you know, like the money should follow the kid. And that led to older people, you know, some saying, hey, well, I don't have kids. I never had kids, or my kids graduated. Why isn't my money following me? You know, like I pay the taxes, right? And Phil had this great point, which is, look, if you don't offer people other things that they can do to generate money, you don't offer them a specific skill set in the CTE program, you don't offer them upward mobility within the academic field to go on to college, you don't give them some skill set, you don't hand them some hammer in their hand where they can get to work, you will end up with prostitution and drugs. Because those are the base level things that somebody can do to make money, to survive. And again, having people in Vegas where it's like, oh yeah, you can be a prostitute. It's all right. People will default to that. And especially in a vacuum of other skill sets, it's going to be a preferred option or at least an option that's very heavily relied upon if we don't have other things to have kids do.
When I was working in the state of Nevada, I learned real quick there were people who could make $80,000 parking cars, and some of us with master's degrees didn't even make that kind of money. And we're like, gee, this is interesting. So, it's a different type of economy than Idaho specifically. But my skills and talents from Idaho that I gained here by volunteering a lot of my time and doing all the different things we had to do, we just wear many hats. When you're a mental health or social worker in Idaho, you wear many hats. You do so much for the community. You volunteer, you're on boards, and all that can lead to really good experience. We've worked really heavily on this thing called the zero intercept model. And your goal was to keep people out, we call it the zero intercept, where they would enter into the law enforcement's door. And the goal is to keep them at the zero intercept and do your best to do upstream prevention and serve those people prior to them ever entering those systems. And we've been starting to move that direction here in Idaho recently. I've been really proud to be a little bit of a part of that in the early stages and watching the development. And Idaho's been very innovative. And so we're hoping that we can continue along that path and serving those families and those people closer upstream before they ever get into those crisis modes.
Okay, talk to me about this. I'm very curious about what is it? What is the investment that's being made? What are the mechanisms getting put in place to help with that upstream prevention?
Well, okay, so we're starting to change. For years, Idaho didn't put general fund dollars into drug prevention, substance abuse prevention. In Nevada, I had $4 million from state general funds going into that. And Idaho hasn't done that typically. So that Joint Millennium Fund has been really nice. In the last few years, they shifted away from giving all those funds just from Medicaid. They were doing it for Medicaid and a few programs. They're shifting more now towards serving the kids and the families in different settings and all the various settings they are. So it's really nice to see funding. And some of that's going to schools, some of that's going to community nonprofits. Some of them are a little bit of it for adults, some for law enforcement pieces, some to make sure we're doing child protection and diverting kids away from the justice system. There's just a lot of money flowing that wasn't flowing before. So it's really nice to see that, those kind of things can be very successful if we make sure that they're long-term getting funded and watch the trends and make sure that they're not failing or anything.
Right. You make sure there's no fraud, waste, or abuse.
Yes, correct.
Right. Yeah, and you need efficacy and say like, hey, look, we had 2,000 kids last year and we put this program into place. Now we got 1,700 kids or something like that. You get
well, it's just cheaper if you think about it. In Idaho, they did some Office of Drug Policy had their own programs that they implemented, and they came back and they had an independent study, and between $24 and $26 of a return on investment for every dollar they were putting out into those prevention.
Wait, we have an Office of Drug Policy?
Yeah, it's called the Office of Drug Policies under the governor.
Write this down.
Meridian King is the director there.
Meridian King. I got to get Meridian King in here. And you're saying they get a 26x return?
Yeah, something like that. I think it was between 24 and 26. And I told everyone, I said, imagine if that study was totally off and only half of that was working. Would we still invest in that? And everyone's like, well, yeah, of course. So if I got a 10-to-1 ROI versus, I worked in treatment for a lot of years. I watched a lot of people have, they would go to treatment and then they would fail and come back and then fail and then come back. And you're spending a lot of money on something, and it's a lot easier to just prevent it up front. In my local program, I could see it's around $1,200 to $1,500 a year to serve one kid, and they can get many, many hours of interventions per week. It's not just like once a month or once a week or twice a week. Therapy is very expensive. All these other services, so the higher up the tier of individualized and specialized services you get, the more expensive. So lower levels like prevention that you can do for the whole community is way cheap, and it's the way to go.
Yeah, man, the community level, because ultimately when you're dealing with drug recidivism, there is a problem. There's a conflict with the individual and the way they're moving through the world, but there's also a conflict presumably with the community around it. Because you don't have just one person who has drugs and does drugs by themselves alone and nobody else does drugs. It's you have to have supporting mechanisms and a supporting economy around that drug user to even supply those drugs. So it's look, there's a broader problem with this. And when people leave, say, rehab and things, and then they reintegrate back into what led them to drug abuse in the first place, they end up back in the rehab, right? So it's you got to do a community-wide effort and push to offer different alternatives and ways through life.
Yeah, and people have to also, I've always said this, they have to be ready. And there's no, and we force people sometimes to go to treatment, and they're just not ready. And so we're spending money to do this thing that feels right, but it's not going to work until their brain and their mind is ready to change. They want that for themselves.
What is that? Like you got to hit bottom.
Sometimes,
that's the commentary.
We hope
right?
that you don't have to. That's why I love prevention, because I worked for, I don't know, I spent 14 years just direct treatment provider and watching all this stuff happen. Then I was like, prevention is so much more fun, because I can teach and educate and I'll build community programs and do all these things prior to it ever becoming a problem. So in 10 years, that kid who was on that trajectory never goes that route. It's kind of like it was a lot of people heard my family story, and that's why I was successful. Is I had good, healthy adults programs, and I chose to go away and not be around drugs and alcohol. Even though I worked in bars, like we talked about earlier, I'd watch those individuals and I'd go, boy, I definitely don't want to do that when I get older. So I would learn as a kid, and plus I had seen and witnessed some stuff that most kids shouldn't see, and that just drove me even more to be like, gosh, I want to stay away from this, make good choices, and you look for those healthy adults that make good choices and learn from them. And then over time we learned the science of prevention, and it became fascinating to me, which is why I love working in that space right now.
My guy, listen to me. How are you a politician? like how did you find your way? Like, you have such a passion for people and helping. It's like,
that's exactly why I'm in politics.
That's not why. Like, if you're not against drugs and alcohol and all this crap, like how did you end up running, obviously successfully, and pursuing this course for your life?
Yeah, if you talk to my wife, right, when I was really young, I was in college, I was in the student senate and student politics. I helped people then, and my professors always said, gosh, yeah, he'd be really good at this someday. And then I wanted to let them know when that actually came to pass, to go back to that college professor, and he had passed away, and I was trying to reach out and say, hey, when you said this 20 years ago, but it was in my mind. It's funny because there was a TV show in high school called Beverly Hills 90210. A lot of people probably, and there was a character on there, his name was Brandon Walsh, he ran for politics in college, and for me, I just like that idea, like this character, I can make an impact. But as I got involved in the various aspects of my profession, I know I mastered a lot of skills in my profession, and then I went into the government and I worked for the state, and I administered those same type of programs. And I didn't like other people setting policy who had not experienced that side of it. And I said, gosh, somebody's got to go and be the advocate, and I'm interested in it. Why not me? So when the time was right, I told my wife, it's time. I'm going to run now. And I did. And I won. And I've been very blessed to be able to impact the areas of specialty that I have in that, juvenile justice, adult corrections, mental health, substance abuse. And I've really stuck in that lane, tried to keep my focus on that. So that's my expertise, and that's what makes me more successful as a legislator, rather than getting into all those other things that I'd rather the other experts deal with. And I think that's the best legislature, is when you have citizen legislators who really want to make an impact, help each other, and work together to achieve those things.
Okay. Two things. Who was the dude who played Dylan in 90210?
Luke Perry.
Luke Perry.
He passed away a couple years ago. He also played in 8 Seconds.
Yeah, 8
cowboy
Seconds.
movie. I'll never forget. He played Lane Frost. That was a great
man.
film.
And he died.
Yeah,
in that film.
And I grew up going to rodeos, and I was at that rodeo when that happened long time ago. I think it's 1988 or something. My family's in the summer we go to a lot of rodeos, and
that's awesome.
Cheyenne was not too far from.
Man, he never did anything like 902. I hope he made enough money to live out the rest of his life, because he also, you may not remember this, Luke Perry was in the intro scene of The Fifth Element, or the Sixth Element, one of those. No, Fifth Element. And he was like this archaeologist, and like aliens.
Oh, how funny.
And like I remember being in the movie theater and people booed when Luke Perry came on, because like, it's the wrong generation. Anyway, Luke Perry, that was one of them.
There's some good actors out there,
Yeah.
It's unfortunate when they pass early. Yeah. Well, and, Shannon Doherty from that show's passed on as well.
I didn't know that.
Her mother lived in Bozeman, Montana when I was living. That's the days when I was a radio DJ, and her mom sang, and she was in a country music contest, and her and another actress from the Picket Fences, that was a TV show, they were there, and it was my first time meeting a celebrity that I had watched on TV, and I was like,
it's you.
And she was so short, and I was like, whoa, I'm way taller than you. Same time, like when I met Kenny Chesney when I was young, I was like, holy cow, he's tiny. I'm like a 6 foot tall guy, and here's these little short people.
Dude,
are rich
I
famous.
I get the exact opposite. Most people are like, wow, you're taller than I thought. I'm like, why does everybody think I'm so short? One person was saying that they thought we were standing up during the episodes, and I'm like, no, man, you got to get comfortable. But they were like, I thought you were like, 5'6", 5'7".
That's
Like, why, man? But so again, Luke Perry, RIP. Adult corrections. We just had a turnover in the directorship of corrections in the state of Idaho.
Yes,
I actually
we did.
had Chief Corey Stanball in, and he had a lot of things to say about our corrections department, and he felt, and I've heard this from other law enforcement agents, that they felt that the emphasis towards trying to engage on a human level with the people that are being held, like in the Department of Corrections, and integrate them into like that corrections community, either by hosting, family times where they have bounce houses and stuff, and corrections officers and the actual inmates are encouraged to bring their families and fraternize and things like that, or to the level of providing free vehicle transportation, for different, out of house jobs, things like that. He had a lot of things to say about that, but like, what is the answer for this, right? Like, you don't want to create an environment that promotes more recidivism and repeat offenders, right? But at the same time, like, you're in jail or you're in prison, like you wrong someone, like justice has to be served, and that's not always pretty, right? Like, you've lost a portion of your freedom or your freedom entirely for a reason, right? So how do we balance that?
Well, my focus this year has been specifically on the women. And I'll tell you why, because I went in the women's prison and I could not believe when we toured it and visited with the various inmates, hearing their stories and seeing that they weren't being visited by their families. Their children had been taken away from them. And so we're putting an extra burden on the system in general, because we're putting those kids in foster care, right? Because sometimes the dads aren't handling it. Sometimes they are. But the women would tell us they don't get visits. It's not like the men who are in prison, they're getting tons of visits because the women are coming to visit them. Right. And so it was shocking to hear those small numbers, and to hear that in Idaho, it was 76% this year, the study came out, or 76% of the women who were in there for drug-related crimes. Happened to be one of my specialties. And I'm like, what can we do? I've seen models in other states where they had homes that they put these women in, and they had them specifically going there for treatment, and it was sentencing. So before they go to prison, the last kind of thing you could do, and they can move there, live there with their families, do treatment all day long, get well, right? And get out quicker and get transitioned and have monitoring and have people looking after them who are on their team. Versus if I send them to prison, it's like now there's not a whole lot of people on your team. You're stuck there for a fixed sentence or however long until you're paroled. And we're spending that money for however many years, versus if I can focus on this treatment route. So when the new director came in, because T. Walt and myself and Director Adams, who's leaving as well, yeah, we were planning a team effort to try to look at this summer, maybe go and tour a couple of those types of facilities and see what it would cost, get to the administrative piece of that, and then see what it will take us to kind of duplicate that kind of a model in Idaho to reduce the amount of those women that are going into prison. So that's kind of one of my priorities for this next year. I'm hoping that we can make some headway on that and make an impact in a good way.
So the idea then would be, hey, look, let's take this gal, this is Susan. Susan gets popped for methamphetamines or heroin or something, right? Now, is this person that you're describing, are they like a dealer or are they a user? I mean, what? Because it's my understanding we don't have people sitting in our prisons for.
There's a variety of reasons. Yeah, Some of them, it's because they got into illegal activity based on their drug habit. Right, stealing. Some of them are dealing, or whatever. Yeah, it could be there's a whole lot of methods and reasons for that. We have minimum mandatory sentences. We've got all kinds of reasons they're in the prison. Mm-hmm. We don't have I think our adequacy of mental health support services in the prevention space are inadequate in Idaho, and they've kind of gone downhill in the last 15 years, and that's partially through policy. I remember working and that was another motivator that set me to wanting to be a legislator someday, because I would sit in my office and do all this work, and I was basically working for free sometimes because it's what the people needed. There was no way to get paid for that. It wasn't billable, it wasn't a billable function, but it needed to be done to support that person and keep them out of prisons. And so I probably saved, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars for the state by people not going to prison when I was supporting them in the as a mental health provider. And then when they change policy, it leads to a serious stoppage of that, and it just shifts them from support services to prisons or to jails. And it's really easy to see the correlation there. And I said that would happen when they start changing policy. So I said I want to make the policy, not just allow it to happen that way. And so I stand up for the tough policies sometimes. And it's not always the most popular, because right now Medicaid is a big driver of expenses, and people want to cut that in a big way. And I do too. I want to cut it efficiently and create something else before I just destroy a program, right? So I want to make sure that there's something there to support those families and not just cut costs. And that can be done. There's methods to doing that, but sometimes we just do the fast way and the easy way.
Right. Yeah. Right. So bottom line, it sounds like from a fiscal standpoint, and Director Adams was fantastic.
Wonderful.
I've had him in a couple times, and his description of how he's decreased, he was like, listen, that we have to decrease this, and we have to decrease it effectively, not just say we're not going to take any more foster kids, but decrease it by keeping kids in families, having family units be more successful. He's like, because down the line, it's like $17 a day for prevention if I can help a family stay together, right? It's $80 a day for foster care, and then it becomes like $1,000 a day if you go to like communicative care.
Same thing with prevention and treatment. If you spend the money up front in prevention, you save a lot of money down the road in the treatment space, because the more sick you get, the more expensive it costs.
So it sounds like you're also saying, hey, look, from a crime standpoint, if you have somebody who's an addict, who's, let's say, a gal who's an addict, unfortunate situation, a lot of things going on around her, you can send her to jail and she can sit in a prison or serve whatever sentence she has, but she is not going to have support and community to keep her away from those drugs once she leaves the prison. So there are alternate options where justice would be getting served. She would not have freedom in the manner that she did before, but she would be in a living situation where she could still be connected to her family and presumably receive all the care she needs. She doesn't have freedom, can't go down to the park, walk around like anything. She's still technically on like arrest in some manner.
You're
like
incarcerated in a system that's different.
Right. Yep. But you're still incarcerated. You're still mandatory treatment and everything, but you can have social interactions.
If you wouldn't succeed in that program, then you would be stuck in the prison. And that's kind of the dangling carrot. It's kind of like your last step, because drug court is usually the last shot. You go through drug court, and it's really cool. If you ever get a chance, you can watch and witness those graduations. Like being on Judiciary and Rules, I go in the courts and I watch how they do those things. And it's really cool to see those people work their tail off to get done. I also witness them give up and say, just send me to prison. And that's really sad when that happens. And the judges work really hard to get them to change their mind to work their program. But boy, having this other option for some of them would just be wonderful. You get a chance to really succeed, and it's a little more intense than the prevention tier. I would hope we'd catch them at the prevention tier and we'd never see them start the drugs in the first place, but we know it's a reality, and there's intergenerational trauma in families that just drive that, and that's what they saw growing up, and it's their coping mechanism. And so we're trying to change those behaviors and attitudes. It's a difficult task, but it's worth the smaller investment it takes to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What other states, you said you were going to tour other areas, what other states?
A lot of different states do. Texas is the model that Director T-Walt was recommending that we go take a look at. I've seen it in Montana as well, I've toured all kinds of states. Been to Louisiana looking at some of their juvenile models, Las Vegas, been a part of some of the states as well in my career. As I travel around, I get to consult and sometimes get to help build those programs myself. So it's been fun to watch. But one time I almost took a job as a director in a facility kind of like that, which is why I was interested in. It's like, gosh, I can't believe we don't have that in Idaho. It'd be really nice. And just the last couple of years when I saw that report on the women incarceration rates and how much it was related to drugs. I was like, well, we can do something about that. Let's do something. Something's better than nothing. I like to solve Idaho problems, Idaho way. You can get inspiration from out of state, but you're also going to do it the Idaho way. And we're going to be fiscally conservative. We're going to really do a good job of showing how by doing that up front, we're going to save money later, and a lot of it, and that's how we'll, I think the legislature would be more interested in doing it that way.
Yeah, entirely fair to have some presumption of presentation of ROI. It's like, listen, I'm down to spend all the monies. Just tell me how the money comes back and in what form. Like, am I getting a return? Is it greater or less? I mean, if you talk 24 to 29% or 26% X, like that's a fantastic return. And again, that was obviously the focus of Director Adams's position, which is, look, this is like he came from budget, bright guy. Like this, look, this is real simple. If we can do this, it makes us money. That's it. Like, that's a wonderful investment that should be articulated to the state, because who wouldn't get past that? It's like, give me $1, I'll give you 26 back. All right. Can I give you $10?
Yeah, I'll buy that. I'll give you $1. Give me 20.
Yeah.
That's what I love about, I've said it before, prevention. And I'm looking forward to meeting the new director of health and welfare, whoever that may be, because it'd be real good to work directly. And because that stuff does in fact impact the prison system and the family and the health and welfare system. So they go hand in hand. And that's kind of why we need to work as a team, because we can reduce the amount of children going into the foster system and child welfare system in general. So if we reduce those numbers, we're going to do good.
Gosh, that's great. I had no idea there was a big push for that. Yeah, we got to figure out some way to have justice served.
And it's not just me. There's other members of the committee that are really highly devoted to that. I just happen to have the professional experience, so it just makes sense that I kind of lead the charge. But there's many other good people that I work with in this legislative body that are really interested in the similar things.
Staying on health and welfare, talk to me about parental consent, because parental consent is something that parental consent bill actually is something that merged with problems or created some problems within the foster and adoption care system. For instance, and again, for anybody not familiar, this is a mechanism by which the state of Idaho says, hey, look, man, if you got somebody's kid and it's not your kid, you can't take them to the doctor and like have the doctor do things, right? You got to get parental consent. Okay, well, that's fine. And like, yeah, we don't want any nefarious or ill intent practice, but you have situations where you have somebody in emergency foster care, right? For whatever reason. And the emergency foster care parent is like, hey man, let's take you to the doctor, get you checked up. Let's get your eyes checked, right? Looks like you need some dental work, whatever it might be. Just normal parental things as this youth is in the charge of, this adult. And they can't do that if the parents aren't accessible. They might be in jail. They may not be able to find them. You have instances where people are hanging out with grandparents and they don't have official, legal guardianship. You have all of these problems that kind of came from that perhaps may not have been anticipated. Like, how are we going to resolve this? Well,
I talked to the sponsors who originally pushed for that bill, and they indicated to me that they'd fix those things over time. So, some of them have been very problematic, especially in, like if you get out a juvenile who's been incarcerated. I've heard stories where they're like, I can't do anything. It's frustrating. And in schools, so what we've done in the organization I work for is we just make sure that we put it in our paperwork when we're having kids sign into our program, simple things that we can do, basic treatment of like Band-Aids, things like that. We want to make, if they need a Tylenol or something, we just need to make sure that we've got parental permission. It's kind of you think of it ahead of time so you don't have the issue as much. A lot of people know early on, I did not support that original form of the bill. I understand why the legislators brought it. They were really frustrated with some of the things going on.
What was that? What were they frustrated with?
Well, I mean, there was the way they were teaching and coaching kids on specific things were probably most likely related to the gender issues that are going on in the state. And I think that's what drove the problem. Because for years, my argument was, gosh, for 30 years, this has been fine. The kids have gone and gotten their own treatment. They've been mental health, but and as a provider, I said, I've never in my whole career had to talk to a kid about a particular thing about their gender change, anything like
right,
that.
right.
It just wasn't a thing. And in the last few years, it's been a more of a hot topic in the state. So I think that might have been what drove that. And so people are making sure that they're protecting the parents' rights too, so that they know what's happening with their child.
Yeah. And look, I'm very, like, there are a lot of problems in my former state that shall not be named. There are a lot of problems. One of them is that if you are 12 and in the public school system, the public school is obligated to transport you and provide to a clinic if you want reproductive care. So you got a 12-year-old getting transported by the school to get an abortion or medication, transported back to school, and no information to the parents. They do not have to inform you that they did this.
Yeah,
so like,
that's crazy.
Crazy, right? But what I'm wondering is, what were those things happening here? Like, was this preventative or was this reactionary? Like, to what degree were we experiencing actual problems like that in the state?
That's the problem I always had. Is I always say my rule is tell me where it happened, who did it, like which classroom, which teacher, and which counselor, any of those things. Because if you can tell me that, I can go right to that source and take care of the problem. And there was a case or two in our area where some legislators found out some things were, and it was phenomenal to see the reaction, because all 4 or 5 legislators that knew about it called the proper people, had it handled, and it was taken care of because you knew the specifics, right? That's how you can handle it. So I can't tell you the statistics on how frequent or how busy, but when you know the individual case, you can handle it one-on-one situation. And that individual was fired long-term, was not retained as a professional in the school.
I sure would hope not.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the proper way to handle those kind of things. So that did, I'm guessing other parts of the state was probably heavier than others. And that did drive some of that policy. Just, it's unfortunate that it happens.
Do you know when the sponsors of that bill are looking to make those revisions? Because it's my understanding they did not bring proposed
They did not
revisions
this year. Those 2 that brought the bill originally, both are open to those suggestions. I think that they just want to make sure that it's for them. It's actual real thing. Talking to them because I said I could generate a list of the things I've heard in the public, because I get a lot of phone calls because of my background. People say, "Hey Marco, you understand these things? Hey Marco, can you talk to so and so?" Because I have their cell phone numbers and can text them, and they have assured me that they, if it's a true problem, they're willing to listen and hear people out. And that's what I love about this legislature. No matter how different people are politically, they all are willing to work together and solve problems. And they're good people. They really are good people. I always stick up for my colleagues because they get a lot of flack for whatever extreme opinion they may or may not have and their bills they bring. And so I try to stand up for them as much as I can.
Yeah.
And I don't always agree with everything they do, but we're typically pretty good to each other.
Yeah, as you should be. Like, I met a dump truck of people this year, and I heard some bills that I was like, that's wild. Like, I had we do have some wild bills. Man, I had Jordan, Representative Redmond in, and I had him in 3 times, man. I really enjoyed him. And he came in one time talking about reading 5 minutes of the King James Bible at the beginning of every public school day. And I was like, wow, right? And I was like,
be nice, but at the same time, we can't legislate morality on people.
Right. And I wanted to understand, but I was like, this is wild. Because as long as I remember, it's like, separation of church and state. Hearing that out, it's like, wow, I'm glad I hear your perspective. Doesn't mean people have to agree with it. I had a Representative Heather Scott, and it was like, God bless her, right? She came in, she was talking about like cricket protein labels in case somebody's, putting insect protein in food stuff. And then she had a flag bill, and she was like, I think the flag is like a sex flag, and you shouldn't be able to fly it in any municipality in the state of Idaho. And I was like, well, what about like local control? So like, well, I think it's, again, all of these things, and you have competing principles, right?
Yeah.
It's almost never, there's almost never one right answer. It's like, okay, but this principle applies here, this principle applies there. Which one's more important? Like, they're pretty close.
We have that debate every day on the House floor.
So like, I agree with you. Like, there are things where, you know, you hear some wild things, but at the end of the day, like I have enjoyed every single person I've spoken with. I'm like, it seems like everybody's working hard.
That's what I like about them.
Yeah.
They're all genuine to their cause and to their issue. It doesn't, again, we don't all agree, and we
Right.
all have different opinions, and we have different perspectives of how to govern and how to interact with each other. And it ends up working in the long run. And again, we could fix when they make mistakes. We could fix them the next time around.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of unfortunately, it's not the best way to govern. I prefer to let's work hard, get that thing right. You know, but I've even had bills of my own. I've had to come back the next year and change because of misinterpretations, or a lawyer thought of it this way, or they went too far, too extreme with it. You know, so sometimes you have to clarify language, and that's what we learn as we put things out there.
Right.
We make mistakes, every one of us, and sometimes we fix them, and other times some people are like, nah, we don't care. It's no big deal. And someone else will bring a bill to eliminate something you did, and you could maybe take that offensive or go, well, like, you know, there was the yellow dot, for example, that bill this year went away. It was something Heather brought that says, well, there's no use for this, and it wasn't being utilized, and it was Carolyn Troy's bill from the past, and we all liked her. Dot? It was just a place where you could put your medical information, so if you were in a car accident or something, they could see it real quick. It just wasn't being utilized, so they just did away with the program. So sometimes that's just how things work around there, you know.
Yeah. Are you running again next year?
I plan to, yes.
Man, let me ask you something. You seem like such a optimistic, nice guy. How do you run a campaign, like a political campaign? Like they seem so knocked down, drag out, insane, just
genuine.
Slit your throat, steal your cat. Like what? Like how do you make it through that? I can't
run a campaign like that. I'm just going to be me, and I think my constituents know me enough and know who I am in the community. I have a base of supporters, and as long as I'm not doing stuff that's really contrary to their beliefs, they'll support me, you know, for a while. I'm one of those people who will self-term limit. I never got in this to stay in a long time. I had a set agenda of what I wanted to achieve. I've achieved most of those things. I'm still working on a couple of them, and I'm really close to achieving the things I said. In fact, next year, I mean, some of that stuff could be fully achieved, and then I'll have to think of what else do I want to do. You know? But so there's things like that I don't think I'm kind of on the backside of my legislative career. Don't plan on being here forever. I'm not a 20-year person.
20 guy,
no, I come in and then try to get the next person in, and you know, let their perspective come forward.
You're the director of a not a community center. What is it?
Well, I'm the program director.
Program director, yeah.
Which is kind of, you know, means a lot of different things, but more it's a place called Community Youth in Action.
Yes,
and it's a nonprofit organization that deals with drug prevention is our priority. Substance abuse prevention in the community, and then we have an after-school component, teen center, where teens come after school. We pick them up from school, bring them in, help them interact, and do some classes like enrichment classes. So there's sewing, there's music, there's whatever the kids want. You know, there's a D&D class and magic, and there's
Magic the Gathering.
Anime. We got STEM programs. We got sewing. We got, I mean, basically all the things, art. You know, things kids and families want.
Where? What city is this in?
In Idaho Falls. Yeah.
Idaho Falls. I would love to come see that center.
You're welcome
if you
to
guys
anytime.
Because again, I've been doing a lot of work with many things. There's Community for Youth, which is run by Dr. Megan Smith out of BSU. We're also doing a program. The state PTA is collaborating with a bunch of other people for a More Social, Less Media event on April 26th at Eagle High School. Really trying to help people understand that the only way we're going to get kids off of technology is if we make communities around alternate engagements. Like you have to find passions.
They build connections like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
We'll take a kid who's socially isolated, in a few months they're socially interacting with all their peers.
Yes.
They're engaging in their community because we do leadership classes. There's all kinds of opportunities for them to become leaders if they want it. And we just get them engaged. And it's funny because sometimes the juvenile probation will send kids to us specific for those pro-social skills and to get community service for nonprofit. And we'll take them out. We do a lot of community-based projects, and their hours will be up and they're still serving. And we're like, hey, did you know your hours are late? And they're like, yeah, I know. And they just do it intrinsically motivated because they love it. They feel something. They feel connected to their community.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to have a community they can connect with, because you can take away a kid's cell phone. That doesn't mean the kid is instantaneously going to be surrounded by like his or her peers or like great adults or guidance. It's like, no. The problem is we don't have enough engaging communities. We don't have enough guidance in steering kids into these communities. They get stuck on their phones. A lot of adults are stuck on their phones, and that leads to all these downstream problems. But if we collectively as a community can figure out a way, okay, let's engage collective action towards, I mean, Jonathan Haidt talks about it a lot in The Anxious Generation. Let's move towards collective action as a community, and that will make places for our kids to integrate. That'll make places for kids to connect with each other, so they won't feel drawn to this just like,
and they'll find their purpose.
thing.
And that's kind of why we give them a variety of activities to participate in, because it's like, it's free for them. They don't pay any money to attend, and they get to dabble in different things. Like when I was a kid, I would have dreamed of having a guitar class or ukulele or piano or art, for free, go to a center and just get that, man. And I didn't get those opportunities, and these kids get them for free, and they get to dabble a little here and there and decide. And some of them may take a career path in some of those things that they get to experience. Like we have technology, we have a new podcast room they're going to get to play with, kind of like what you're doing right here.
Yeah.
You're going to love it when you come tour and see that.
I would love to showcase that, because again, there is, it's across the state, being on the state PTA, it is clear that across the state, parents are struggling. They're like, listen, there is this gaping problem that's hiding in plain sight. Everybody knows our youth are struggling with technology. They get it from their homes. They get it from friends with burner phones. They get it from the school with school administered tech. We need to engage them in a different way.
My daughter's school, they take the phone away at the beginning of the school day, they stick it in a box, and you get it back at the end of the school day. It's really cool. I like that policy. I think it helps the kids focus on what they're there for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did a podcast earlier today. There was a remote podcast, okay? And my phone, wherever the hell my phone is, it was on the table because like I had... they'd sent me something that I wanted to have. And dude, just looking at this person and having a phone on the table in front of me where the screen was on, I was like, I couldn't do it. Like, it's terrible. I just realized my phone's in my pocket. When I have an in-person conversation, I never have the phone out. Even me in my 40s, it's like, I can't even be around that thing. If I was trying to learn geometry, good night, man. Like, no way I'm learning biology with a phone like vibrating in my pocket.
At least you have a calculator on your phone. Because remember when we were kids in school, they used to say, you'll never have a calculator on you. Now we all have them in our pocket. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. I remember when when I had my TI-84 in pre-calc, some of the guys got some video games on it. Like somebody got Independence Day. Now, mind you, TI-84 has pixels that are like this big. So it's like you're this little block, and it's like you're Will Smith in that like you're going around. That's a spaceship, and it's like a little blob.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, Representative Erickson, I know you gotta get going because you gotta get back on the floor. Is there anything we've missed today that you want to hit?
No, I just appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to do this anytime.
Yeah, listen, I really appreciate it. I don't know when you're going back. I don't know if you ever make it back out, but I want to get you the details on that. More social, less media. I mean, I know the group would love to have support and maybe even hear from you as far as what you guys do to make community up there. So we'll talk about that more often.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.